down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your so happy to have waterback host, Rick. So what do I mean by that? Well, for those of you that didn't pay attention, I did not stream on Saturday because of the fact, and really quick story here, I am going to take us on a little bit of a train derailment here from the normal thing. But basically what happened was where I live, we live on a community well, meaning that it actually acts more like your typical city water service than your own well. Everybody sort of pays in a portion, and they have meters, and they charge you, a certain amount for the water that you use, et cetera, et cetera. And the community is responsible for upkeep, maintenance, et cetera. Well, just like in a city water system, everything from the meter to the house, to the residence, is the responsibility of the homeowner. And Friday mid-afternoon, I get this visit from a representative from the co-op. And she basically tells me that, she noticed, or our meter reader folks noticed, that we had used an exorbitant amount in comparison to what we normally would use. And so they said that it was likely a break in our water line. Well, I went ahead and, tested that. And yes, the meter kept running even though there was no water running in the house. So that basically meant that somewhere in between the meter and the house, there was a break. The thing about it is, though, is that my house is not like normal, city houses where it's maybe, 30, 40, 50 feet off of the road. My house actually sits back, because I live in a rural area. My house sits back roughly 120 feet from the road. And so I spent the entire Friday night trying to find it, Saturday trying to find the leak, and come to Sunday, I had exposed enough of the water line anyway that I just got tired of it and said, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to replace the whole dang thing. So I spent the rest of Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday finishing up that job. And, when you are a person of my kind of stature, and, sometimes you just can't afford to bring somebody out on an emergency basis, you kind of have to tackle things on your own. And so that's essentially why I was not streaming on Saturday. But the good news is, by Monday morning-ish, I had the new line installed with water flow into the house, and there are no leaks. So don't call me out to be anybody's plumber. I'm not a plumber, but I am smart enough to kind of figure things out with the help of the local hardware person. So anyway, so that was basically 4 days without water, 5 days at least, with just an adventure that I'm not used to. And yes, so 3 Chevy is asking if I had a copper line or PVC. It was actually a black plastic. I think it was polyethylene, like a standard water line, but it wasn't copper. It was not copper. I did replace it with or do a partial replacement. I should be honest with you. I did a partial replacement of the section of line that was leaking. And that section, was a good probably 120 feet long because of the meandering way that they took the damn thing. But that particular section, I replaced with PEX, PEX. So it's a PEX line. It's buried properly in most locations as best I could get. And so hopefully the next freeze comes, I won't have any issues for a little while. So anyway, yeah, it was just a mess. And come to find out that I found out from the water company that they are actually cleaning one of our reservoirs. So they've moved us from one of our typical reservoir that we pull from, and they switched us over to another reservoir. So that was another interesting little piece that came out. So anyway, yeah, I mean, and 3 Chevy says PEX is great to work with. You're right. Those connectors that they have for that it's really fairly simple. I mean, to be honest with you, the hardest part of the entire endeavor had to be digging the trench, getting it, deep enough, because I had to dig it by hand. I don't have a backhoe, unfortunately. That's the one implement that I do not have, is a backhoe. So anyway, and also some folks have noticed that I am a little lower. My ears are a little lower than normal. And basically, I'm going to explain that after trying for roughly 2.5 years of growing my hair out, have finally decided that I'm just one of those types of people that my hair gets to a certain length and then stops growing. And so I'm not going to attain the length that I really wanted. And so therefore, I went back to my usual, and there you go. It's not really a flat top. It's just short on top with the buzzes on the sides. And of course, my wife just popped in and flicked her eyebrows. So she actually appreciates the fact that I'm back to what she would consider a normal haircut. So there you go. Probably only going to do that maybe once every 6 months instead of, the once every 2 weeks that I used to have in the service. But ironically, it was a Marine who cut my hair. So there you go. A friend of my son's, he's in the Marine Reserves, and he learned how to cut hair while he was at boot camp. And so, yeah, it was just awesome. Anyway, so there's my whole endeavor over the entire weekend. Everything is cool. And thank you. It is buddy approved. And so anyway, yes, thankfully I didn't have to dig my very own well. That is, well, we don't, unfortunately where I live, the community well takes over. So I can't just like magically dig my own well as much as I would want it. But all right, so enough of that. That explains everything for last week. Let's get on to the important stuff. Tonight I'm actually drinking a different kind of thing. There's a company out here. I don't know if they're nationwide or if they're just Northwest based or just Washington based, but there's a company out here called Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's essentially says that, or essentially had this bottle. My wife happened to stop by. She loves Trader Joe's. And so Mrs. Whiskey happened to stop by, and she grabbed a bottle of this pre-made old-fashioned. Now, for most of you that don't know, an old-fashioned is actually a mixed drink that is made from bourbon. And this particular one has bourbon in it with cane sugar and a custom blend of spiced orange bitters. And that's what I'm drinking tonight, is this. And I have to admit, they recommend doing it over ice. So, of course, I pulled out the old round ice balls. And, yeah, so there you go. I've got well, you can't really see the color. It's actually a really light brown, but because of the green screen effect, it doesn't really come through. It looks more like water. But it's actually pretty good. I think I'd rather my whiskey straight, but I would definitely drink this. So anyway. So there we go. It's got a little bit of a, like I said, orange spice at the end, a little tang to it. So it's actually not bad, but that's what I'm drinking for tonight. Okay. Now let's move on to the next thing. Get my affiliate sponsorship out of the way here. Institute on the Constitution, of course. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. And boy, do we need it now. All right. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. Whoops, three. See, 3. There's 3 fingers there. 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.whiskeymusings.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course materials and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.whiskeymusings.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.whiskeymusings.online. Phonetically spelled, that's India, Oscar, Tango, Charlie, .whiskeymusings.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.whiskeymusings.online and it will redirect you directly to the page where you can buy this. This is a fabulous gift book. It's got about 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather. The internal pages are water resistant, and look at that stitching. It goes all the way through the binding. They have a 100-year warranty on the book from defects in materials and workmanship. If something goes wrong with this due to a manufacturing defect or the materials start falling apart or whatever, they will either fix it or replace it anytime within 100 years. This is a awesome keepsake gift. Prior to Christmas, it would have been a wonderful stocking stuffer. I know of at least one 12-year-old young man who has one because of the show, and I am awful proud to allow him the opportunity to learn about this absolutely wonderful document that we live and should be abiding by. Of course, this administration doesn't. But anyway, do me a favor, go and check out the Institute on the Constitution today, and I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate and with them. All right, so let me go ahead and... All right. So tonight, and actually over the course of the last couple of days, it's been really, really interesting because I've been working outside so much and not really paying attention to what was going on in the news. I ended up coming back today and oh my gosh, what the hell happened? Apparently my water line wasn't the only thing that went absolutely, screwy this weekend, because something came out this weekend which was just absolutely amazing to me. But I want to hit, and I want to talk about that in particular in just a second. But I want to focus on one thing that happened just this morning. It's been a incredible thing that popped up. I don't know if anybody knows this, but hopefully nobody's traveling during this, because if they were, they would find out that there was a big problem this morning. And let me show you this setup. The FAA, the FAA apparently had an outage of what they call the NORTRAM, I think that's right, system. And basically what that system is the communication between the tower and all the pilots to deliver special messages to the pilots. Dan Bongino talked a little bit about it this morning, or on his podcast today, where he was saying that it was communication that like the Secret Service would use to tell the pilots, hey, this zone is off limits to you guys flying. If you are, if you need to fly in it, here's the restrictions, here's some of the things you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. It's a messaging system, basically, to go between the pilots and the ground and probably the pilots themselves. I don't really know a lot about that. But I do know that as of this morning, they were not allowing planes to take off. They were allowing planes to land. Now, the White House is saying that there's no evidence of a cyber attack. I don't trust this White House for anything. So I wouldn't be surprised. Not saying this is. I have no inside baseball on this, but I would not be surprised to find out in a few months from now, maybe 6 months from now, that this was actually the result of some sort of a hack or some sort of a cyber attack. Really wouldn't surprise me any. just because of the fact that I just don't trust the White House on anything. And realistically, I mean, these FAA systems and everything else are supposed to be closed systems, meaning that they should not have any kind of internet access. They shouldn't be outside of their own connections. However, I do know from a particular source that I'm not going to necessarily talk about that there is a network that is connecting a lot of these airports together. So there is a possibility of something happening. I just don't know necessarily how that would go along with that. So, also apparently later on in the day that they finally lifted the airline ground stop as flight delays and cancellations pile up across the country. Supposedly they got the issue fixed, but they still don't know what the issue or how the issue occurred in terms of overall what had happened. But so hopefully everything will be kind of fleshed out by tomorrow and we'll be back to, normal flight schedules. I'm hoping nobody is necessarily in transit at this time. I know that my buddy Steven Stiles used to travel quite often at his other job. And I was talking to him right before coming onto the show. And I mentioned, wow, be glad you weren't flying when this got impacted. Because apparently this is the first time in a very long time since 9/11 that they've actually had every flight across the United States locked down. So, yeah, that's just very, very interesting to say the least about that kind of a situation. All right. So the biggest news that everybody's been talking about is apparently Monday evening, the story broke that a former office of the former vice president of the country and current resident of the White House had some classified documents in an office that he no longer uses. Now, the thing about this particular story is the fact that the Trump administration and Trump himself has been accused, obviously we know of the FBI Mar-a-Lago raid, of improperly storing documents, secret classified documents. And, here we have now the sitting president who is also accused of the same thing. Now, what's interesting about this is the reaction in the press. The press is obviously poo-pooing Biden's, but they go after Trump. And there's a couple of things that they missed, that they are overlooking, or let's be honest, they are probably specifically ignoring, because if they didn't, they would end up having some challenges when it came to accusing Trump of what's going on. But I've got four or five articles on this, so bear with me. We have the first one here where Joe Biden says that he is surprised to learn about classified documents in his former private office. To be honest with you, I think this guy would be surprised about anything, because I doubt that he is up here clear in that situation. But the fact that he even had them outside of where they should. Now here's the thing. If you recall, I did an episode when Trump's Mar-a-Lago got raided. And during that episode, I explained the fact that the president, and only the president, has the ability to declassify pretty much whatever he wants. Okay. The thing is, though, that does not extend to the vice president. Now, here's the problem. There's several problems with this. Problem number one is, first of all, that Biden, who was VP at the time these documents would have been removed from their secure locations, he was the vice president. So he, by constitution, does not have the authority to declassify those items. And reportedly, there were some SCI or top secret SCI documents that were found here. Now, the news pundits are running around and they're saying, oh, it's only a handful of documents versus, Trump's 400 or 500. legally speaking, that the number of the documents means nothing. The fact that you have a top secret, specially compartmentalized information document in your possession that is not part of a secured location, a secured and approved location for viewing called SCIFs. Okay. That his office is not a SCIF. I guarantee you that his office is not a SCIF. And so the funny thing is that, you know, he had these documents. They were from the period of when he was vice president. So he could not have declassified them on his own. And on top of that, they were found right before the midterm elections. And of course, rather than leaking that information at that moment, which would have potentially caused a bit of a tailspin for the midterms, okay, they kept it quiet. And they are now releasing it. Dan Bongino made a good point today. It's more than likely they released it because of the fact that they know that the House of Representatives is getting ready to do an entire investigation of the Biden administration. So they're trying to get out ahead and kind of soften up the blow, let's say, from all the subpoenas and everything else. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Okay. The news media, the mainstream media, and all of the Democrat leftist idiots, they all jumped on the bandwagon and said that Trump had taken documents and was hiding secret documents and everything else. But the only thing that we have seen so far, outside of a few descriptions of what the FBI found, has been covers. We haven't actually seen the documents themselves that were supposedly showing up at Mar-a-Lago. Now, even if they do show up at Mar-a-Lago, again, Trump was the president at the moment that he got a hold of those documents. He could have just waved his hand and been like, these are now declassified. And nobody could have done anything to him for it. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of people, and you're going to hear the mainstream media do this. I mean, there's already people on CNN that have been talking about this, saying that, oh, well, you know, the fact that there are so many of Trump's documents is the problem. The fact that Trump had them when he was a civilian. Well, let me remind you, folks, Biden left office in 2017. He was a civilian until he became president 2 years ago. So that doesn't fly. And then you also have the whole idea of whether or not they were secured. Biden's documents were found in a locked cabinet inside of an office that had no other security that we know of at this moment to protect those documents. Trump had them locked up in a closet at his residence with 24/7 Secret Service protection around him. I'm sorry, but you can't get much more secure than that, realistically. So what this does essentially is it brings up a bunch of questions, and it also brings up the idea that maybe this whole thing about going to Mar-a-Lago and this this whole Trump thing is not going to happen. As much as the Democrats and the liberal left and the leftist idiots of this country, they all think that, oh, this time we've got Trump. Well, guess what? No, you don't. And I told you this a long time ago. You don't have him because you have to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Trump did not declassify those documents before he took them. That is going to be incredibly impossible to do. Now, the other thing that you're going to hear the left talk about is how reactive the Biden camp has been over this entire thing. Like they immediately, you know, as soon as they found what they found, they immediately turned them in and they immediately sent them to the National Archives and they said, here, you know, this was a mistake, blah, blah, blah. They're trying to potentially fall on their sword. And so the argument is going to be that the Trump, because he was kind of slow playing his whole hand, while he was still working with the teams at the National Archives to try and get those documents put into place, they're going to try and say that Trump, by slow playing it, he was actually doing something illegal. Again, the Presidential Records Act, where they talk about all of this stuff, was and still is an administrative code. It is not a criminal code. It is designed to be an administrative process to recognize that presidential records need to be kept and saved. If you recall from my episode on it, it started when Nixon was in office because of his tapes that he used to keep. So this whole thing is going to be very, very interesting to watch how this plays out over the next several days. But townhall.com has 4 questions that they came up with about this scandal. So let's just scan through these 4 questions really quick. The number one thing is that the Biden team says that the president is unaware of what is contained in the classified documents, didn't know they were in his office, and did not review them before they were passed to the National Archives authorities. So here's the thing. All right. But totally Biden could be unaware of them. I mean, this was 6 or 7 years ago when he took them, for number one. But the thing about it is that it doesn't matter whether he was aware of it or not. Being unaware of the law, like Dan Bongino pointed out today on his podcast, being unaware of the law does not absolve you of being guilty of breaking that law. So, sorry. I mean, he may have been unaware of it, but he had to be aware of it at one point because they were in his freaking office, at I think it's the University of Pennsylvania or whatever. But anyway, the second thing was, between Hillary Clinton's shameful and deceitful criminality in this realm, we're talking about the 33,000 emails and all that stuff. Now the revelations about the current and former president, one must wonder if any high-ranking U.S. officials from a certain generation followed the rules on handling and storing of classified materials. This is a good question. I mean, if the VP at the time was taking top secret, specially compartmentalized information, TSSCI, out of those secure areas without having the ability to declassify them before they got taken, then who else has documents? I mean, let's be honest. Everybody has had problems, from Bill Clinton with the tapes in his sock drawer to Obama still having something like 50,000 pages being stored in some off-site storage facility somewhere that the National Archives hasn't even categorized yet. Every single president has had a problem with this particular act. And so realistically, again, I think this is an entire nothing burger. For what's going on here. All right. The third point that Town Hall brings up is, if the Biden documents were found on November 2nd, nearly a week before the midterm elections, how and why was that discovery suppressed until after that election? Now, the fun thing is that even the New York Times apparently posted that same question. So according to Twitter, the New York Times asks why the White House waited 2 months to reveal that classified docs were found at the Biden's university office days before the midterms. Obviously, the reason is because they didn't want to affect the midterms. If this had come out just like the freaking Hunter Biden laptop scandal, if this had come out in the press, it would have swayed public opinion toward the Republicans, not toward the Democrats like they wanted. Anyway, and the last point that Town Hall brings up is one thought that initially came to mind as headlines emerged last night. This is printed yesterday. Is that whether or not these low-level classified materials that may not have even been marked as such, which could lessen the impact of this kerfluffle. But if they weren't marked classified, how would Biden's personal lawyers have known what they were looking at? It's essentially what they're saying here is that these materials had to have been marked classified in order for the lawyers to actually know that they were looking at classified information. That's true. I mean, if it was just a piece of paper with no markings on it, how would you even know whether something was classified or not classified? You wouldn't have any idea. Well, I can tell you that they have different stamps that they put on just about every page of documents. When the documents are collated and put together, it is marked somewhere on that page, whether it's in the footer where it says confidential or classified or whatever level that this document is, it is marked on every single page. That is part of the requirement for this. And apparently, according to Town Hall, that they've learned more information about the materials, that they were dated between 2013 and 2016, reportedly pertaining to intelligence involving Iran, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. Okay. So, yeah, this is once again, we have Joe Biden doing exactly what he was accusing Trump with, in terms of classified documents. And just for fun, the Washington Free Beacon, of course, brings this up, and I'm not going to play the video, but you can go to the link in the description below. You can check it out. But there was an interview that Biden did when Trump's documents were supposedly found by the Mar-a-Lago raid and back in September. And Biden basically said that having those documents was irresponsible. Yeah, irresponsible to unknowingly possess classified documentation. Well, guess what, dude? You now unknowingly, to your own claim, possess classified documentation that honestly you never should have even had, because you were a vice president and not a president who could have declassified them before you took them out of their spaces. But he called Trump irresponsible about that. What a fiasco. What a fiasco. Well, it's not just the general public and the news media who are going to be looking at this. It's also the House. But before I get to that real quick, the Epoch Times has this piece where it talks about the differences between Biden's classified document stash and Trump's document stash. Now, I've already kind of covered a few points already, but these are not the same points that are in this document here, or this article here. They actually talked to the Epoch Times actually talked to a few legal experts, and they, obviously, as legal experts are want to do, they go ahead and gave differing opinions on this whole thing. One of them was basically talking about the differences being that, just the massive amount of documents. Another one talked about the difference being, let's see, where is it? So, let's see, the small number of documents that were found, the president's personal attorneys, cooperating with the archives and the Department of Justice rather than trying to stonewall like Trump is accused of doing. Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, Trump saying that these were handling or the seizure was an act of retribution by his political foes, which, honestly, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Now, both sides of the lawyers actually do say that there actually is no legal difference between what Biden did and what Trump is being accused of doing. So because of that, if you let Biden skate, that means you got to let Trump skate, because obviously there's no legal difference between the two of them. They were both found with, potentially classified documents. And I do say potentially because, again, you have to prove that Trump did not declassify the documents that he had in his possession prior to taking them to Mar-a-Lago, to basically warrant this out. Now, we know that Biden was not president and therefore did not have the ability to declassify the documents. So that particular piece of information is actually probably going to be Trump's saving grace, because nobody can prove or disprove the fact that he might have, or that he declassified those documents before he took them. Biden has no leg to stand on here because Biden was not president. Biden was vice president, and vice presidents do not have that power. So there we go. I actually think that 2023 is kind of starting out pretty cool with this whole thing. And one of the things with 2023, of course, came with us taking over the House. Now, the interesting thing about us taking over the House, okay, first of all, before I go any further, keep in mind that just because we have the House, just because there are going to be all these investigations, just like I was talking to Stephen Stiles before the show, and I said this to him, I said, look, the House is in the control of the Republicans, and yes, we're going to find out a bunch of things, but is anything really going to be done? Probably not. And the reason being, and I just want to throw a reality curve, and it's not really much of a curve. I just want to give everybody the reality check of the fact that everything has to go past the Senate, which the Senate is not in our control. This is part of the reason why it is so important that we were to take the Senate in order for anything to happen. So even some of the stuff that the House is doing, even though some of the things that we've heard reporting, like the IRS 87,000 agents being defunded by a bill, the Senate has to agree to that, and they are not going to. So realistically, all that is, for the most part, is just some pomp and circumstance. However, as I said about the lawsuits that are going on, like the Missouri and Louisiana lawsuit against Biden administration about the COVID-19 suppression of information via social media, it may not necessarily be the outcome that is the most important, but the discovery process during the entire investigations that is the more important piece. And so the House has already said that they are going to launch a panel to investigate into Biden's classified document stash. And you know what's really funny is everybody was talking about, oh, well, he only has it at this one office. That's it. Well, just before I came on the program, I got this breaking second batch of classified documents discovered by Biden's aides story from the Post-Millennial. Now, this one I haven't even read yet, so give me a second here. I'm kind of scanning this, and it apparently they've discovered at least one new batch of classified documents separate from the Washington, D.C. office where the documents were discovered earlier this week. The Post-Millennial says a source close to the matter said that aides have been searching for any additional classified documents since the first batch was discovered in November, prior to the midterms. NBC News reports. The source spoke on the condition of anonymity, I don't even want to try and pronounce that. But anyway, so it was reported on Tuesday by another anonymous source that the intelligence materials discovered were related to Ukraine, Iran, and the UK. Now, these apparently another source told CNN that the documents are U.S. intelligence briefings and memos related to topics including Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom. And then, yeah, so they apparently have found, they don't really specify where, but they were apparently, there's another location, at least one other location, where classified documents have been found. And again, the key point in all of this is literally comes down to this. First of all presidents have had problems with presidential records. They have all had issues with the Presidential Records Act. So that's number one. Number two, though, is the fact that the biggest difference between what Trump did and what Joe Biden did is that Trump was the actual president of the country and could have declassified anything that he wanted. Biden, at the time, before now, but at the time, was vice president and did not have that power. That is your biggest difference. And if nobody in the mainstream media calls that out, they are lying to you. Straight up lying to you. Okay? Whew. All right. Enough of this with the classified documents. I think everybody else has kind of, gone through and covered it. Everybody has jumped on all of this. Seriously, they have. All right. So, all right. So next thing up is Oh, man. Whew. I hope she comes back before too long. All right. So the next thing that I have up on my list is a hot dog. And no, I'm not talking about a ballpark Frank Wiener. What I am talking about is this week's Pet of the Week. And as soon as I can find it here.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
All right. This week, Pet of the Week is... shoot, I'm a little discombobulated here. Give me just a second. All right. So this week's Pet of the Week was submitted by Rumble's Amy Jean Viner. Now, for those of you that don't know, Amy Jean does agility dogs. And by that, I mean they go through obstacle courses. They compete and they go through obstacle courses, which takes a lot of training because they have to go through these things fast. They have to get it right. And they're timed on how quickly they can complete the course and how accurate they are on those courses. Well, tonight's Pet of the Week is her hot dog. Yes, I did say that. Hot dog named Caliente. Caliente's actual pedigree name is Bill Gay's Too Hot to Handle. Sorry, Bill Gay's Too Hot to Handle. And this is her second, and she calls it a turv. I don't know what that is, but when Amy comes back, because she stepped away right before I got to this, she says BRB. When Amy comes back, hopefully y'all in the chat can get her to tell me what turv means. I'm assuming that's the breed of the dog. But apparently it is her, Caliente is her heart girly. And the reason why it's her heart girly is because she considered herself, meaning Caliente, considered herself my service dog when I was first diagnosed with MS in 2007. She was my first speed doggy and loved agility, but refused to slow down. Well, she obviously was as hot as her name presented itself, but this particular picture is Caliente coming off of a teeter-totter. And if you look at that teeter-totter, you can actually see the purple and the yellow difference right underneath the dog. So I don't know a lot about the agility stuff, although I was going to take my golden or my yellow lab Jake through it at once. But basically, they have to touch both ends or the yellow spaces of the teeter-totter. One when they get on, and two when they get off. So I believe. And so anyway, or maybe they have to just touch one out of the two. I can't remember. But the point being is that's why it's the purple and the yellow, is so they can tell what needs to be touched and everything. And Redford just said, since Amy's out, Redford just said they have to touch the yellow. That is correct. They do have, I believe they have to touch both ends. They have to touch the yellow parts, both coming on and going off, in order to do that. So that is fantastic. I do appreciate when you guys send me your pictures of Pet of the Week. And if you want to submit your pet for the Pet of the Week segment on Wednesday nights, do me a favor, send me a picture, some information about the animal, name, breed, whatever kind of dialogue that you want with it. And tell me a little story about them if you want. They can come in costume or not in costume. I mean, if you have a dog that likes to dress up in costumes like the outlaw dogs do, you can go ahead and submit those. Other than that, just send that information and a picture of the animal off to fans@whiskeymusings.online. That's fans, Foxtrot Alpha November Sierra. Let me say that again. Foxtrot Alpha November Sierra at whiskeymusings.online. There is a link in the description of the videos on both Rumble and YouTube, and even Facebook too, I think, if you can find it, to look that up. But go ahead and submit them to that email address, and I will go ahead and get them queued up for my Wednesday's Pet of the Week. And just so you're aware, this is the final one that's in the queue. So if you get me one in the next 6 days, I will go ahead and get your pet up for next week. You can also submit questions for whiskey for Saturday at that same email address, fans@whiskeymusings.online. So thank you, Amy. I do appreciate you sharing Caliente's story with us. And yes, that dog does look hot. Hopefully Amy is coming back eventually, but I haven't seen her return. She just said got back in time. That's perfect. All right. So I'm glad that you saw that, Amy. Thank you again for submitting your wonderful little dog there. Well, she's not that little, but wonderful dog to this week's Pet of the Week. All right. So, okay, a couple of other articles and information that I believe you guys should know. So let me clear some of these other ones here. I want to make sure I'm not clicking on the wrong piece of information. Okay, so everybody knows that we've had this whole thing about COVID mandates that have been going on back and forth. And one of the last governmental organizations that seems to want to get rid of the mandates has to deal with the armed forces. Well, on January 10th, Red State posted this article about that. And it basically is that the Pentagon finally ends the armed forces COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. So they forced all of the service members to get the vaccine. For those that refused for religious reasons, okay, which would be legitimate reasons under any other situation, they decided to muster those folks out. Now, here's the thing. The Pentagon, since they formally ended it, immediately all service members' applications for religious reasons, all of that stuff goes away. Okay. So everything is just taking it out. Okay. They no longer are going to force these people to do any of this stuff. The problem is that they don't mention, I should mention actually that they also rescinded the mandate for both the National Guard and the Ready Reserve. So it's basically all military services. And the indication is that anyone who refused the vaccine will not be allowed to experience any adverse actions if they requested the reprieve based on religious liberty. The problem here, though, is that even though they can have, like, those who actually were dismissed due to their refusal to take the vax, the problem is that those folks will get an update to their records. So most of them got like a dishonorable discharge, or I should say other than honorable discharge from the services. So all of those records will be expunged. But the one part that isn't very clear is whether or not they will be reinstated. Like, if somebody got kicked out because they refused to take the vaccine, they were separated from the service in a other than honorable situation, they may, here in the future, may have the opportunity to re-enlist if they so desire. May, but that's not very clear right now. And in fact, the Epoch Times brought that up and said the chances of re-enlistment are unclear for any of the discharged troops after the Pentagon rescinded the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. So those that were ejected with a less than honorable discharge can petition for a change, which is actually good because having a less than honorable discharge means that there are certain services and certain benefits that they may be eligible for that they can no longer get because they were separated in a situation of being other than honorable situation here. But the fact that they've been discharged, though, is questionable as to whether or not they will be accepted back. Now, me personally, I think they should be immediately reinstated with full back pay and full benefits. That's just the only right and correct thing that this government should actually do. But we all know that the Democrats and the leftists hate the military. And so the chances of that actually happening under this administration and this Senate is probably slim to none, unfortunately, for these folks. Realistically, they get their records changed, so there's at least part of it. But again, honestly, I think they should be completely reinstated. They should be brought back. They should be given back pay, and any other benefits that they may have lost out on that should be immediately reinstated at their discretion. Now, for those that have been kicked out and wants to stay kicked out, fine. Give them an honorable discharge. Let them go about their merry way. But for ones that want to come back, there should be no question, no penalties, no nothing. They should come back with full back pay and benefits, and that should just be it. And Buddy Weiser says they should be reinstated with no pay and no loss of rank. And Picaric says honorable with pay or allowed back with back pay. So anyway, and Redford, of course, says reinstate. And Bonnie on Rumble says give them time back. Yeah. So everybody else is kind of in the same boat. I think it's a travesty that these people, think that they can get away with this crap realistically, and not have anything come out of it. Now, my next article is in reference specifically to Twitter. Now, we all know Twitter files have been dumping, and we've been learning more and more about the influence that government has had over Twitter in particular, but social media as a whole. One thing that we have not seen yet realistically outside of governmental organizations is how much influence have other organizations had on the Twitter, on the social media platform with the Twitter situation. Okay. And Epoch Times broke this, or I don't know if they broke this, but somebody broke this, that apparently a Pfizer board member, and I'll cover the article here in just a second, but a Pfizer board member pressured Twitter to censor posts on natural immunity, low COVID risk to children, according to emails that have been released under the files. Now, this photo here is the then Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, who moved over to Pfizer's board after his stint at the FDA, and apparently did not like a post that was written by Dr. Brett Giroir, Giroir, who was also another former FDA commissioner, believe it or not. But Scott Gottlieb wrote on August 27th in 2021 to Twitter executive Todd O'Boyle to request Twitter take action against a post from Dr. Brett Giroir. And he said, supposedly in the email, this is the kind of stuff that's corrosive. Here he draws a sweeping conclusion off a single retrospective study in Israel that hasn't been peer reviewed, but this tweet will end up going viral and driving news coverage. Now, apparently Giroir had written in his post that it was clear that natural immunity or post-infection immunity is superior to vaccine immunity by a lot. He apparently also said in that same tweet that there's no scientific justification to require proof of COVID-19 vaccination if a person had natural immunity. If no previous infection, he said, get vaccinated. Okay. So here's the thing. Once again, the Twitter files have seriously had some problems. And every time we get a dump, we get something new. We get something different. We get something that shows the corruption that's not only showing up in our governmental organizations, but also in private businesses as well. And one thing you need to know about Pfizer is that up until the COVID vaccine hit, Pfizer has not had, according to some reports and news articles that I've posted and talked about here on this program, Pfizer has not had an actual vaccine passed by the FDA until this point. Moderna was in the same boat. So the question that you have to ask yourself that can come to a logical conclusion on this is how is it that these companies all of a sudden got approval by the FDA for these vaccines when they have been unsuccessful in the past when you've had the whole 10-year process that has been going through? Now, I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious necessarily going on, although it does cause a lot of suspected things, and there is absolutely no reason why you should not question what is going on. In fact, questioning things that are supposedly accepted by the masses is how we do critical thinking. Critical thinking skills are very important, especially in this day and age. And unfortunately, most of the general public has kind of forgotten about this. But the fact is that this person, this individual who is part of a private organization, was able to talk to Twitter and tell Twitter to remove somebody's personal posting, their personal opinion, which is, now we know proven, but it even back then it was proven science also. We all know that if you get the virus and build up natural antibodies, that is much better than a manufactured vaccine. That is science. That is 100% science proven and everything else. But this guy was able to influence from a third party perspective, the social media platform, to censor an individual's free speech. Now, this is really, really damning evidence, once again, first of all, for the people who were part of Twitter prior to Elon Musk's taking it over. But the point here is that it's not just the government. We are talking about a pretty large conglomeration of high-powered individuals who move from government to private entities and back again, and all over within the Washington, D.C. ethosphere that are all attempting to control us, the smellies. And this is bad. This is not, it's bad enough that it's the government, which has the Constitution that's supposedly to prevent stuff like this. But now we have proof of a third party, a private entity, private individual, urging a social media company to censor another private individual for essentially their opinion. And the fact that Twitter went along with it is beyond me. This just gets even worse with every single thing that we find out about the Twitter conglomeration. And I would hate to see what Facebook and the alphabet companies, Google and YouTube and all that, what they could be found out about and accused of for all of this. All right. Now, the minute that somebody says, how much more stupid can Democrats get? I'm just going to tell you right now, quit asking the damn question, because they seem to either raise the bar or sink lower, depending upon which way you want to look at it, every single time they seem to open their mouth. Now, this popped also this week, and my gosh, how stupid can this guy be? And his admin. Honestly, the Biden admin moves to ban gas stoves in a war against fossil fuels. Now, just like everything else that the Democrats propose, or Biden in particular, whenever he proposes something, his administration has to go and walk it back. And I've got an article from the New York Post here in just a second that does just that. But let's take a look at this. So the whole point is they want you to switch from gas to electric. Natural gas, clean burning, prevalent everywhere. A lot of people prefer to cook on gas. And ironically, I saw this Twitter post, which it's unverified, keep in mind. But I saw this Twitter post that was kind of interesting in the fact that it mentioned that electric stoves are not as safe as gas stoves, that they have statistically caused more injuries, more house fires, et cetera, than gas stoves do. And, why that is, I don't know. The post didn't really go into it, but it did mention that as far as safety is concerned, which is what the Biden admin is trying to say as their purpose for banning gas stoves, their safety records on gas stoves are much better than the electric stoves. Now, on top of all that, of course, you have to ask the same question that you do with the whole idea of electric vehicles. Where the hell does the electricity come from in order to, charge, or in this case, power the electric stoves? Well, it comes from coal, oil, and natural gas, because right now all of our power supply is basically based off of fossil fuels, because the one, and I've said this before on this program, and I'll keep saying it, the one type of energy that can keep up with fossil fuels in a long-term solution is nuclear fuel. You cannot have solar-powered and wind-powered to support an entire city grid system and not have failures. California has shown that every single freaking year, okay? They always have brownouts and blackouts due to the fact that they cannot support the amount of power draw that comes off of their grid. Okay? So, I mean, seriously, these also, not to mention the fact that, hey, guess what? And I was out of power for 4 days. My 2 remote sessions that I had to do were due to the fact that I had trees that went across my power lines. We were out of power for 4 or 5 days, which is the longest we've ever been without power. And if I didn't have my wood stove, because I have an electric stove, I don't have gas out here, but I have an electric stove and we couldn't cook on it. We have to cook on our wood stove, which we use for heating and everything else. So again, and even it's not just California. I mean, you can look at what happened with Texas as well, with the extreme cold, in terms of their green energy solutions. But, again, this is, they keep talking about the attack on fossil fuels by this administration. And these people need to understand that just about everything in our lives, from circuit boards to plastics to even medicines and creams and things like that, they all have some type of a petroleum. Well, I won't say all, but many of them have a type of a petroleum base. And so all of these people trying to ban fossil fuels, it's not going to work, people. It just isn't. It's not going to happen. All right. But apparently, shortly after this, there was a Biden official who came out and backs off the gas stove ban talk after all of the backlash that apparently came. And so it was a Biden appointed commissioner at the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission who tried to turn down the temperature after a report that the agency was considering a national ban on gas stoves because they emit harmful pollutants. Richard Trunka Jr. told Bloomberg that the appliances are a hidden hazard in a story published Monday. He also said, any option is on the table. Products that can't be made safe can be banned, he told the news outlet. But apparently he later clarified that statement that any new regulation would only pertain to new appliances after he was called out on Twitter by Representative Gary Palmer, who is a Republican from Alabama. Palmer wrote, over 40 million American households use gas stoves. This type of power should never have been given to unelected bureaucrats, and it's time for it to end. Now, that statement is actually very true because as Biden found out due to the OSHA mandate, when he tried to mandate the COVID vaccine, OSHA's the law that created OSHA did not give OSHA that power. And so that was shot down by the Supreme Court. Same thing goes with some of these other bureaucratic people who think that they hold the power to do this stuff. It's not written in there. If it's not written in there for the, as a part of their purview, it will get knocked down by the Supreme Court if they tried to do it again. Like I've said on this program a few times, Biden is heading to be the most overturned by the Supreme Court president in history. Okay. So we also have, moving in to the next subject, we have the House. And once again, like I said, even though we have won the House, all of the moves that are running around from the House. And I'm sorry, Outlaw Dogs, where did you see the cat? Did you see him? Did he pop up behind me by any chance? He may have. Anyway, let me know. Let me know when you talk. But even though we have the House, again, I really highly doubt anything is going to get done because, of course, it has to go through the Senate, get approved by the Senate, and then also has to pass Biden's desk. Biden has already talked about vetoing anything that comes across his desk. He's already set that up as a war. But that being said, the House does have some powers, one of them being subpoena powers. And this is a great, great opportunity for us to learn about a whole bunch of stuff. So the House creates another panel on the weaponization of the federal government. And so this is specifically aimed toward things like the Twitter files and the First Amendment deal. And also, not to mention, Adam Schiff getting involved directly to try and get somebody banned from Twitter. So yes, if you saw the cat that was behind me, just now that I see Outlaw Dog's message, if you saw the cat that was behind me, that is Badger. He is usually our barn cat, but he does come in sometimes and get some sleep and that kind of stuff. I've showed him off last episode in 165. I think I brought him up and anyway. All right. So the House is creating a panel to focus on the weaponization of the federal government. This, I think, is going to be the one that Jim Jordan is going to be kind of focused on. I know that Jim Jordan wants to go after the FBI in particular and the DOJ, but this kind of falls into that same slot. So, again, a lot of people don't seem to understand and think that, oh, well, the House can, do these investigations and everything else. House committees are designed to be focused on legislative matters in terms of things like the implementation of a particular law when it's written, whether or not the rules were followed, whether or not the government was acting in accordance with the law that was put out there. The whole January 6th committee BS, that is because of the fact that they decided to do a criminal proceeding, which it's even questionable as to whether or not that proceeding was even legal. We already know it was BS, but it had nothing to do with anything that was a legislative agenda. And so because of that, again, House committees or any kind of congressional committees have to, in general, and traditionally have been due to legislative errors by the government or oversight on a bill, the implementation of a bill, or some type of legal and legislative action. To be completely honest, how that's supposed to work. So this fully falls within the purview of the House, is to go after these people for violations of the First Amendment. All right. Let's see. What a time check. Okay. So I got a little bit more time here. I got a few other just 2 or 3 other articles that I pulled that I think would make things very interesting for folks. You remember that when we pulled out of Afghanistan, one of the things that I did mention when China went in and filled the gap, especially in dealing with the Air Force base that we left, summarily left, that there was going to be a big draw for China to try and gain things like mining and mineral rights in Afghanistan. Okay. And the reason being is because of the fact that there's a lot of resources over in Afghanistan, mainly things like, I think cobalt is a part of it, so on and so forth. And China, being a up and coming superpower in the world, is attempting to find and exploit all of these mineral rights. It's been proven in multiple cases across the globe because of their interests in Africa and South America and so on and so forth, that they've been doing. Well, this news article from Fox News popped, and it just proves what I was saying. Our withdrawal in Afghanistan was an entire debacle, not just for the 13 service members that died, though they are very important, but also because of the strategic capabilities that we left in terms of not being able to be a part of that part of the world anymore. And so this popped. Apparently, China has cut a deal with the Taliban to extract oil in Afghanistan. Why does this not surprise me at all? Okay. So apparently China and the Taliban have deepened their ties since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. So their this is the Taliban, this is their first major energy extractions agreement since taking control in 2021, thanks to Joe Biden, and have agreed to a 25-year pact with a Chinese company to drill for oil in the country's Amu Darya Basin. The Amu Darya oil contract is an important project between China and Afghanistan. Wang Yu, the Chinese ambassador to Afghanistan, said in a press conference in Kabul, according to a BBC report last week. The Taliban's agreement with China's Zhejiang Central Asia Petroleum and Gas Company and is set for 25 years, while another Chinese state-owned company is also reportedly in talks with the Taliban to operate a copper mine in eastern Afghanistan. Folks, it was more than militaristic or a military purpose as to why we were there. We could have been helping these people develop some of these resources. Now we have a sworn enemy to the United States, which for whatever reason, the United States refuses to at least acknowledge China is a sworn enemy of the United States. And they have gone in and have exploited the Taliban essentially to gain access to their resources, which will be honestly to the detriment of the United States of America. All right. Apparently, another article here. Apparently, the House will vote on a bill to abolish the IRS and replace the income tax. Well, there's only one problem with that. First of all, again, it won't go through the whole idea of the Senate, and Biden will definitely veto it. But the income tax is actually in the 16th Amendment. I'm sorry to say, but it would have to be a congressional amendment process that would pull out the ability for the IRS to tax Americans' income. Now, you can make the argument all you want about the 16th Amendment being fraudulently passed because of the number of states that actually, voted on it and passed it. You could make a case. You could probably make a case for that in the Supreme Court. However, the Supreme Court has also upheld previous challenges. So the challenge, if you were to make it, would have to be very convincing for the Supreme Court. However, they overturned Roe versus Wade, which was a 50-year supposedly settled scenario. So we could actually see a change that might happen if the repeal of the 16th were to occur. That being said, though, as far as the House voting on a bill to abolish the IRS, again, this honestly, I think is just flag waving. It's just trying to say, hey, we won the House and we're going to muck up the works as best we can while we have it until the Senate is ours. And ultimately we have a veto proof majority across all of Congress. There really isn't anything that's going to be done. All of this stuff is essentially the case in terms of that. Now, that being said, again, like I said, if the 16th Amendment were to get repealed for something, whether it's a congressional matter or the Supreme Court saying and overturning the support of it, realistically, I doubt that the income tax isn't going away. I'm sorry, folks. It's just not. And neither is the IRS, as much as I would love to. Although there is actually a way that the IRS could get abolished, and that would be simply for Congress to take back, and by Congress, I mean both the House and the Senate, to take back the responsibility, according to the Constitution, that it is their responsibility to lay and collect taxes. You can look that up in the first article of the Constitution under, I believe it's Section 8, where it outlines what Congress is supposed to be allowed to do. And in that particular case, if Congress basically said, you know what, we're going to take that responsibility back on ourselves and you're no longer an entity, they could abolish it that way legally without issues, without provocation at all. It could be legally done in that sense where Congress just takes back their power for collecting taxes, laying and collecting taxes. But of course, that means that the entire, or at least the majority of both the House and the Senate would have to agree that they have more work that has to be done, which we all know they're not going to do that. I mean, shoot, they're barely there now anyway. All right. Now, Buddy Weiser mentions that a flat tax is possible. Could be. It would be interesting to see that being proposed, but I think voting to abolish the IRS and replace the income tax, replacing the income tax with a flat tax might be possible, but abolishing the IRS, I don't see it happening. I really don't. As far as that goes. All right. So the last article that I have here is kind of some bad news for 2023. And it comes out of the Epoch Times, and it basically states that massive government spending will exacerbate 2023 economic downturn, according to an analyst. And we all know this is the case. I mean, seriously, folks, Reagan is quoted as saying inflation is the result of all that money and government programs that were supposed to be free. Yeah. So massive government spending actually drives inflation. Even though the Democrats and the leftists don't believe this, you cannot just make money up out of thin air. And when you do that, the value of each individual dollar goes down. That's essentially where we're at. It takes more dollars to buy the same amount of goods as it would several years ago. And that's called cost of living and inflation. It's a simple fact of economics. It's economics 101 for the most part. But of course, the Democrats and the leftists don't follow economics. I mean, hell, even AOC, who's got a degree in economics, doesn't understand this crap. I always think of the donkey with Shrek with her. I mean, I'm sorry, that's off the subject here, but I always think of the Shrek donkey. Whenever I see her smile and laugh and talk, her teeth just drive me crazy. Anyway. All right. Sorry. Back on track here. That being said, the economy is not going to get better, I don't think, in 2023. And I think some people are basically saying that exact same thing. They have negative forecasts that are coming out and so on and so forth. We're just going to have a troublesome year as long as the Democrats keep wanting to spend money. All right. That's all that I have for this evening. And that is my final Whiskey Musings thought, except for this. In today's modern society, there are certain services that people depend on. And even though they depend on them, they don't realize what they have until it's gone. And my experience this past weekend has shown that we have it very, very lucky here in the United States, not having to fight over things like clean water and clean energy, and the ability for someone like me to basically create a program and bring it to you, my faithful Whiskey Warrior listeners. This is just amazing to me that we live in a time where we have all of these wonderful services, all of these wonderful things that most people in the world, believe it or not, the majority of the people in the world, especially over in places like Africa and everything else, they don't have. They don't have anything close to this. And so we live in a lap of luxury, a life of luxury here in the United States. And I think a lot of the times we do not take the moment to realize how lucky we actually do have it here. It is amazing that we have the opportunity to be born in a country as great as this, that despite our petty differences, we have so many things that we take for granted every day. Not having water for 4 or 5 days made me realize that there is a huge, huge advantage that we have just by growing up and living here in the Western world. And the fact that God decided to place us on this continent is a bit of thanks that we need to give to Him every single moment of our lives, every single day. And that, my friends, is my final Whiskey Musings thought. Do me a favor, if you like what I do here on the program, head on over to Rumble and subscribe, or go to Facebook, or, I'll even take it on YouTube. Just go somewhere, Twitch, and subscribe. Follow me on social media. And, all of my social media has been showing up right over here. There it comes right now. All of my social media has been showing up there. And we'll see you Saturday night, next time, on the Whiskey Musings broadcast, hoping that nothing happens between now and then. But we'll see you Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here. We'll see you next time. Have a great evening. Good night, everybody.